Hey, family, it's Denise Hill. Listen, I've been transparent about my challenges with depression. I've done that so that others who are challenged can be inspired and informed so that they too can have victory over depression. I got together a number of voices in an interview series for you. I've gotten psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, counselors, even holistic health practitioners so that they can give you multiple perspectives about this thing and give you more information and tools that you can use on your journey of mental health. Make sure you take notes and, of course, make sure you stay encouraged because you too can have victory over depression.
I am here with some phenomenal women who have a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and they just gorgeous sisters, okay? We're talking depression, and we want to make sure we leave with some insight into what it is, how to recognize it, when to ask for help, who to ask for help, and any strategies to help those who are challenged by it to continue to press forward in life and find success and achieve their goals. So we're going to go kind of around first to have a brief introduction. Miss Brianna Dance, how are you?
Yes. Hi, Miss Hill. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yes, ma'am. So I am a licensed independent clinical social worker in Washington, D.C., and I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland. Woo-hoo! Born in D.C., raised in Maryland. And so I'm grateful to be here and to just thank you for the work that you're doing and talking about depression and how it's not a taboo. It doesn't have to be that anymore. So I'm grateful to be here with all the other wonderful ladies today.
Thank you. Speaking of the other wonderful ladies, Miss Jasmine Price.
Hi, I am Jasmine Price. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I was born and raised in North Carolina. Moved to Northern Virginia first in 2011, but now practice in Maryland.
Wonderful. And Miss Kayana Bradley.
Hello, you all, everyone watching and my fellow panelists. I am Kayana Bradley. I am the owner of Authentic Connections Therapeutic Services, which is a private practice that I run in virtually now, but it's out of DC and as well as Maryland. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in Washington, DC, as well as Maryland, and I'm excited to talk about this topic and to be real and to be open and to be honest and to make y'all smile too. That's important.
Yes.
Always important, right? Listen, I want to start with the obvious, okay? There's continual conversation about how therapy and mental health services are not available or accessible to people of color, and that there aren't enough people of color who work within the mental health industry. And I'm sitting here looking at three beautiful women of color. Is that a myth now, or is there still a lack? And any one of you can answer.
Ooh.
I would say that it's not a myth. We are there. However, I think that the way that mental health is set up in the community is not as effective as we hope. In terms of taking care of our clinicians and making sure that they stay and that the turnover rate is not high. Sure. And giving our clinicians support within the community. And so our clinicians sometimes leave community mental health where the need is big, and they go to private practice or group practice.
That was Ms. Jasmine Price. Thank you for that. And of course, some of the industry things, we, as those who are challenged with depression, we don't really have a way to fix that. That's kind of inside the house part that those who need services can't really affect, or can they? Brianna, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, there are some in-house things that go on, and there's also something I'm passionate about. I have background in journalism. And so I'm all about marketing, and like, it may be out there, but is it visible enough? So I think that there's not a myth. Like you said, that we're wonderful Black women. We're here, we're doing the work, but are we being promoted enough? Like, what is the media saying about Black clinicians, and how are we depicted in movies, or like, just kind of demystifying some of the things that are out there, because we're out here.
Yeah.
But it definitely needs to continue to evolve into like, we need more.
Yes.
We need more.
Well, Ms. Kayana, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say too, I'm not gonna, because I think what Jasmine said as well as what Brianna said is I ditto that all the way. One of the things that I'm noticing, because it is now starting to kind of be more in the media, as far as, you know, I have clients who come to me. It's a show now with the Black therapist. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, where, you know, she's now, you know, a part of it's I can't think of the name of it, but it's all about her interaction with her clients, and she's Black. You have celebrities now who are talking more and more about mental health. What's happening now is, like myself and Jasmine has her own private practice as well, the Pride of Nala.
Yes.
Yes. And we've been full since I can remember. And what happens is, you do have individuals who look like us, who are, you know, of women of color, men of color, and they want someone to look like them. But what happens is, we can only see but so many clients, right? So now with Brianna works with me in private practice as well, where we're now trying to, she's new, but there's an influx of people calls that she get weekly. So it may be as well, I haven't done the research on this, right? But it's not, I do think we are the minority in this field, right? I do think we are the minority. So now, because it's getting popular, what happens when I'm full? I have another clinician. What happens when she's full? What happens when Brianna full? And now, who else can you come to? And I get, a lot of times I get clients who do call, where I try to at least give them some type of referral to someone else, because they can, you know, I've had individuals call crying because they can't find anybody. I've had people who's very distressed, again, because they can't find anyone. Even when you use the necessary outlets, Therapy for Black Girls, other online things that are specifically for clinicians of color, it's very few.
That moment of transparency, that was me. So hard to find somebody, to the point where I just really was like, you know, just forget it. I've been surviving this long. And that, of course, is not a healthy place to be at all, because those who tend to be the encourager for others often are in most need of support and encouragement. And I think I even came to Kayana. I was like, listen, you need to be I can't, because I know you. Like, what is that about?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that, the fact that there's such a growing need now, is that reflective of a growing need that's fueled by the things of society? Or is that just more awareness that mental health services are available if you need help?
My opinion, it is that we're breaking the stigma. I know in my community, I know for me growing up, you know, and I'm 40 years old, but growing up, I didn't even know, when I went to college, I didn't even know that there was a such thing as a counselor position, because of the school system. I'm not going to talk about the school system, right? Because, you know, people can grow, people can change, but I had no idea. The way that I even got into this field was because I took a test, and the test revealed to me what I'm good at. And I said, yes, that's what I want to do. I went to school to become an athletic trainer because I wanted to talk to athletes to help them when they're going through situations. It's a counselor, not an athletic trainer. I didn't want to do anything with doctor stuff, but I wanted to be able to be a support system and a listening ear. And now I have a lot more tools to do more than just listen. But again, awareness. So now, even when we were talking earlier, when we started the call with you, Denise, who do you run to? Who talked about this? Wasn't talked about in schools. Now this is, you know, you have Depression Awareness, Mental Health Awareness Month, Depression Awareness Month. You have social media. With now my clients, yesterday I had a client send me a TikTok that was saying, she said it was a person calling and saying, I'm just calling my therapist to talk about the coping skills that's not working, that I'm not actually using.
Wow.
And she sent me that, and she had to apologize and was just like, I know you tell me to do stuff, I don't do it, but I'm trying to change. And it made me laugh, and I need to send it to you. So I'm a start journaling. I know we've been talking about this for a year, but I'm a really start journaling now. But that was, I love the fact that what I am doing is actually being solidified or backed by social media. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Did either of you want to contribute to that?
I think the awareness is there, and we are having the difficult conversations. As a clinician myself, I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, but the counselors were there, and my mother and my father had the resources, and they had me in therapy because I battled with depression and anxiety since kindergarten, and they noticed that. But now, I remember when I said, okay, I'm going to be a therapist, and then my family would be like, all you need is Jesus. And I'm like, but you say you support me. But I've started having those difficult conversations with family and friends, and a lot of people that I know are starting to have those same conversations because they want those negative, unhealthy patterns to end with them and not be passed on with their children. So the awareness is definitely there. And society right now, as we're going through so much, is also pushing the awareness and pushing people towards people who can support them.
Sure.
I when you said at age 5, my ears like, really? 5 years old. So Brianna, jump in for me and talk about what depression looks like, whether it's 5 or 40. Like, what does depression actually, is it just you laying in the bed covered? Is it hyperactivity? Is it crying all the time? What does depression look like?
Depression is more than sadness. So it is when it's impacting your functioning. It's like you have a loss of things of pleasure, things you would want to do. You no longer isolation. You don't want to be bothered with anyone. I'm sure, like everything else in the world, it can look different for everyone. So there is no one size answer, but it is beyond just the surface level of I'm having a bad day. Mm-hmm. So I think it takes a lot of self-assessing and the kind of mirroring what my norm and what my baseline is to where I am today, and just kind of tracking what these emotions are and how it's either having me regress, having me to stop doing things, or is it making me to do things that aren't abnormal for me?
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I think the important part that Brianna mentioned was it's not a one size fits all, and it's important for people to know themselves and know their bodies. And I talk about body work with my clients all the time, because when you get to that point, you need to be able to say, hey, this is out of the norm for me, and understand when I need to reach out. Even if you started counseling and stopped and you're doing maintenance, or you successfully transition out of therapy, you can say, hey, I reached a bump. I know this is not the norm for me, so I need to reach out again to a former therapist or find another.
I got to go back to you and 5 years old. So that type of self-awareness you would think comes at a much later age. What should parents look out for?
So because my parents knew what was normal for me, my mother used a lot of language that would help me be able to talk to her. So if your child's behavior tells everything, right? And so a lot of times if a child is acting out, they want to tackle the behavior first instead of saying, okay, let's go underneath, because you're trying to tell me something. Just like when a baby cries, they need something. And when they get older, when they talking back or get extreme, they're trying to tell you something. And so if your child is outgoing and they, love sports, but all of a sudden something happens and they slowly start to say, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. They're not talking as much to you. They're not communicating with their friends, or their grades are falling. Those are things that you want to look out for.
Okay, that's great for a parent to become even more aware, because oftentimes we feel like we didn't get it for ourselves, so we want to make sure our kids get it.
Sure.
Right? We want to make sure our kids have access to the things we didn't have access to, so they can be better than we were.
Right.
And so, Kayana, you have your own organization, business. I'm not sure how we talk about
private practice. Private
practice. Thank you. You have your own private practice. What types of things do therapists and you all counselors, what do they offer to somebody who comes to them with help? Because there's that stereotypical image of laying on a couch and just talking. And so what is therapy?
Therapy can be that. I remember when I had my office, because right now I'm virtual due to the pandemic, I had a client who came in and said, you know what, I want to lay down. I want to do what I seen on TV. And I'm like, if that's what you want to do, let's go for it. What we are offering is a way of teaching people, like Jasmine was saying before, learning how to connect with yourself, how to become more aware of how you feel, how you think, how you process, right? Being able to identify your emotions, being able to identify your thoughts. Sometimes, a lot of times what I see is individuals, PhDs, successful, but they don't know the difference between what they think and what they feel. You ask someone, how do you feel about that? And they'll tell you, I just think that shouldn't happen. I just think that it's so messed up that that's happening to me. You just told me what you thought. You didn't tell me what you thought, what you felt, because I'll say, I think our culture, we really don't focus on feelings, right? We focus on showing our emotions, but not dealing or managing our emotions. Covering our emotions, again, but not dealing or managing our emotions, right? Trying to be logical with our emotions, but again, managing our emotions. So that's one of the things that we as clinicians help to do. If I bring it all the way back around to how I started, is to really help you to identify things to help you connect to yourself more. And then we give the skills, coping skills, right? We let you know what distorted thinking is. Where did that come from? I've had so many clients when I tell them that minimizing a situation so minimizing is when you make a situation that you're going through and you say, it's not that bad. I mean, yeah, I was molested when I grew up, but that happens, right? Or yeah, my mother was an alcoholic, but a lot of people in my neighborhood, mothers was alcoholic, so that's not nothing. Now you're minimizing, but to find out that that's actually a thought distortion, it's like I never knew that this is something that people go through outside of just me. So now it's not a you issue or you problem. Let's deal with your thinking that's outside of who you are as a person. That's outside of you being enough, you being lovable. Let's think about this thinking that has taken place due to the injury that you have experienced, whether now or in the past.
Wow. And Brianna, you have counseling in your title. What's the difference between, if there is any, between counseling and therapy?
Right. So I am a therapist. A little bit of the difference is between clinical social workers and counselors. And you guys can correct me because I don't know the curriculum, but it's just probably some classes. I have a track where I went to Howard University. Shout out to HU. And basically we do the same work. Fundamentally, there may be some different coursework and curriculums, but social workers and counselors are licensed. If you're licensed, can do therapy also. So that's a little bit of the difference. Mm-hmm.
Jasmine, did you want to jump in on any of that? On any of what therapy has to offer?
So Kiana summed it up beautifully, right? And I just want to bring awareness because when I started out working with children and parents, and now I work solely with adults. But just pointing out how making or modeling for your children what it means to be in your body and to be connected with how you feel. Because a lot of times when I was working in the schools, it would be, oh, you can't be mad. Well, yes, he can. He can absolutely be mad. Why don't we model what that feels like, what it looks like, the proper verbiage, and give them tools so that they can learn how to express that anger appropriately and not just say, you don't need to be mad. You don't have to be mad, because indirectly we're teaching them to ignore their feelings and push it down.
So,
And I will. Oh,
yes, go ahead. No, jump in.
What I was about to say was, I just had a session, and what happens is, in order for me to be a licensed clinical professional counselor, I had to go to school. I had to go to undergrad, right? I had to get my high school diploma. I had to get my undergraduate degree. I also had to go and get my master's degree. Oh, and I also had to get hours, right? And I also had to, so even now that I got my hours, now I had to take this test that try to stress me the heck out, right?
Ooh.
But then I had to take this
Yes.
test to prove that all the schooling that I received and all of the training that I received, I could be able to pass this test. But when it comes down to being a parent, when it comes down to being somebody's wife, being somebody's husband, when it comes down to being, like I said, that parent or any other roles that we typically have outside of our jobs, there's no licensing board that is saying if you do something wrong, we're going to take your license back. So I'm making sure that I am not going outside of certain boundaries. There's not a such thing as that when it comes down to parenting. When it comes down to even marriage, you get a marriage certificate, but all that means is to go down to the courthouse and get a certificate that says you can get married, right? There might be, people may go through, before I even say that, it's not required. So now what Jasmine was presenting to us is that that's one of the things we have to give and help people through is sometimes you don't know as a parent. And especially if you didn't get parenting when you grew up. And like Jasmine was saying earlier, those generational cycles. So now you have a 5-year-old who was struggling with depression, but because we was not taught that emotions are only indicators and emotions are only uncomfortable or comfortable, we feel that emotions are negative and positive. So when we see a child being angry, we're now saying that they're being disrespectful. So now we can't really check in with that child because we're now having to deal with our own feelings of just being disrespectful by a 5-year-old. So now we can't even check in with them because we lack the skills to check in with ourselves. And this is why therapy is so important, because now when that parent comes in and you tell the parent that you have to teach, if you feel that what they are doing, how they are acting out their anger, see, that's the issue, is disrespectful. How are you going to teach them how to act out their anger that is not disrespectful? And then what you will hear, and I consistently hear it when I say that to parents, is, I don't even know how to do that myself. Wow. And comes, okay, well, let's talk about it, right? Let's go through that. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I want to add one more role to it because you're talking about parenting, but I took a deep breath after Jasmine shared because I'm in the educational system as well. And you got to add teachers to that because in many cases, they're with the children more than the parents are. You deal with a school day. I mean, they could get there at 6, 7 in the morning and not leave till 4, 5, 6 at night. So, that parent sees them for a few hours before they go to sleep. But that teacher has to deal with that child with the attitude or is told to be disrespectful. So, without dissecting the industry of education, because it has its own requirements and expectations and numbers and this, that, and the other, can you speak to the teacher and say, what they can look for in a student and how they can advocate for that student?
You absolutely can. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ready. Let's go. Let's go.
I would say seek understanding, gather information, really get to know the families, because when you know more, then you can then operate differently. So really, really come from a place of empathy and wanting to understand. So then you can say, hey, I need help understanding. I need maybe training. I need to speak with, the parent. I need to speak with other teachers that may have a better connection with the child. Or I would really try not to do it on your own, but really try to seek understanding and reach out.
I was just going to say, you absolutely can, and it's beneficial, but I would encourage the teachers always to be gentle with themselves, because I don't know how it feels to be in a classroom with 20 plus students and they all have their own stuff that they're coming in with, and we don't know how they went to bed. We don't know how they woke up. So, recognizing that you are human, but also being open to suggestions as well, and knowing when it is time to say, hey, I need support.
I think that's important. I think both what you guys said is very important when you're dealing with teachers. Another thing is you can talk about the teacher, and you also now have to talk about the support around the teachers, right? What is in place when it comes, because a teacher is a teacher. A teacher is not a therapist. Yeah. A teacher is not a counselor. A school counselor is actually not a counselor who is dealing with mental health. And a lot of times people end up getting that mixed. because you're saying you're school counselor, you're supposed to counsel me. A lot of times in school counseling, they're dealing with more of school issues, right? They're dealing with making sure that they have their grades in place. And what I'm not about to do is overstep my boundaries, act like I know all of what a school counselor does. But as a case manager, I've gone into schools where therapy, providing counseling and or therapy, which is the same thing, is not a part of that structure. Right now, of course, they will be able to speak to the client, to the student, but as a teacher, their role is to teach. So now they have to be able to say, here's something that's going on with this child that I see, and what referral is there for them to be able to make. So the teacher, the counselor may not, but some schools are now checking in and recognizing that not only do you need a school counselor, a school social worker, because a lot of times the school social worker goes out into the community and deals with the parents. You also have a mental health professional in the schools as well. And I think more so now the pandemic is starting to show that there is a high need to have this resource. So like Jasmine was saying, for the teacher to not be so hard on themselves, trying to do everything themselves, right? You want to be able to see what you see. If you see a child who is disruptive in class, if you see a child who's always coming to, not always, that's not used the absolute, who typically is coming to class, putting their head down, they're sleepy most of the time, they're not eating, or they're eating a whole lot in class. This is not, and it's not, going back to what Brianna said in the beginning about what depression can look like, if it's abnormal to their normal routine. If it's someone who's excessively talking now, but they used to be quiet, or someone who all of a sudden is not talking, is not as happy as they used to be, right? I have a client now who just said that they told me that a teacher recognized that they was not as happy as they usually are, and they pulled them to the side. But that pulling to the side could accompany a referral, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's take it out the realm of children and jump back into grown folk.
Okay, let's talk about the grown folk.
Let's talk about the grown folk. Had a rough day, or had a rough week, or, I just always seem to be down in the wintertime. It's summer. I can't wait for it to be summer again. Well, maybe it's just because it's that time of the month, or I just broke up with my boo. Maybe it's situational, but that situation lasts for a year, or maybe it does just last for a day. When you're a grown person and you just have life coming at you in general, when do you know to ask for help? Outside of just, I'm not being productive, because that can become a norm. And now you don't even see that is a mental health challenge. When do you advise someone to ask for help? And then here's the big one. Where do they go? Because there's psychiatrists, there's therapists, there's life coach, there's pastors, there's a minefield of mental health services. Mm-hmm. When should they access them, and where should they start?
That's a good question. I think that for myself, when you find, I believe that therapy can benefit everyone, right? I believe that life coaching can benefit everyone, right? Now, psychiatry comes into play. See, the difference between a psychiatrist and a therapist is a psychiatrist is actually a medical doctor, right? They went to medical school and they are typically prescribing medication, right? And so they're not doing an hour-long session with the client. What a psychiatrist is assessing for is, do I need to prescribe you medication for whether that is depression, whether that is whatever you may be diagnosed with. So they might take your weight, they might take a baseline, they might need some blood so they can figure out which medication works best for you. That's a psychiatrist. So now you're going into, now let's go from a psychiatrist to a therapist. A therapist is a person who typically can go deep. We might be dealing with childhood. We might be dealing with the actual diagnosis, whatever that may be. Like, again, we talk about depression, we talk about bipolar, we might talk about a personality disorder. That's what we talk about. The biggest personality disorder that most people want to talk about now is narcissism, right? And that's what we deal with. Then you go to a life coach, and you'll be able to talk more about that because that's what you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a life coach is more of a person who's, from my understanding, is helping you get from point A to point B in your current situation. What are your goals, right? I have 2 clients who have life coaches in addition to me. And one of the things is a life coach typically talks to you more, right? I see people, my clients, and I'm talking about these clients, I see them once a week or every, right? Twice a month. That's how I'm do that, right? But they might talk to their life coach 3 times a week, depending on the what package that you got from the life coach. And a life coach is the one who's pushing you. You said you wanted to start this business, so here are the things. Here's how I motivate you to start this business. Well, I can do the same thing. I'm now going to talk about what's behind you not wanting to start. Do you have a fear of failure? Where did that fear of failure? Did that fear of failure come from when you were in class and your mother came up to the school and you're right? I'm connecting so many dots. And the life coach is like, here are some of the things that you're doing, and let's get to it. So how does a person know they need help when you feel that you're struggling? Right. And that struggle does not mean that you don't want to wait until you're drowning. Right. If you're struggling, why not reach out? Right. If you have a headache, a lot of times we will go and we will get a Tylenol. If you feel like you're struggling, I don't know what's happening, I don't know what's wrong with me. A lot of times what we go do is we might go get that wine bottle, right? We might go call up that ex that we said we was going to leave alone, right? Or we might go get a new relationship because that makes us kind of forget about what's actually happening. But instead of going to that wine bottle or that relationship or whatever else you may get to, why not make that call to see? You might want to start with a life coach. You might want to start with a therapist, and that's going. Now I've had clients tell me, if I ask them, how did you find me? They'll say, I just Googled a Black female therapist, and you came up. You can now Google life coach. You can actually Google, I'm struggling with focusing on my task. Who can help me? And you will get something that will pull up to let you know where you can go. But that's what I'm thinking. What are you guys' suggestion?
Something I love that Jasmine said was her relationship with her parents, her mom. I have a therapist now, and I love her. And I've been with her for about 9 years. And I think it was about when I was 19-ish. I was really struggling. I was really going through some stuff. Just to briefly share a little bit of my story, I was adopted when I was an infant and didn't know, my parents really struggled with that rejection, that abandonment. And so I was feeling, like Kayana said, filling voids with all types of stuff, bad relationships, alcohol, weed, everything. And so I just knew I needed help. And so I went to my mom, and my mom is the one who got me connected to a therapist. And so from there, I, started doing the work, started doing the unpacking. And so even if there's someone in your life, I want to encourage someone, if there's someone in your life that you trust, that you can say, hey, I'm struggling, or, I don't know what to do, but can you help? Then they can redirect you to the type of help that you need. I love what Kayana said, start somewhere, start with life coaching, start with your pastor, and then your pastor can redirect you, so there's just start, reach out to someone who's trusted.
Jasmine, talk to me about virtual therapy versus in person. Of course, there are people who will hide behind a camera and that would never come in office because they feel like they're kind of more protected that way. Is it as effective as in person?
It is as effective. Is personally, it's not my choice, but it is effective. I can still very much observe changes in behavior and affect, even when my clients are virtual. As a lot of times, if you talk to any of my clients, they'll be like, well, she pulls my card. She'll be like, okay, you came to talk about this, but your body and your energy is off. So, what's going on? A lot of people do prefer in person. In person is just more intimate. So it really just depends on preference when the when the world opens back up for real and we're all good. Some people feel like they can share more virtually because they're not in person, and then others feel more comfortable sharing in person.
So it's another tool. You see it going anywhere?
No, it's here to stay. It's here to stay. A lot of clinicians have, transitioned into fully virtual, and it does have, its pros and cons. But no, it's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
It's here to stay.
I think another thing with virtual, there are things that you are able to see that you did not see before when they came into your office, right? You get to see habits that you wouldn't see in your office because you can't do certain things in your office, right? You can't smoke in your office, right? So you're not even why would you? A lot of times I'm not asking about your nicotine usage. Now, might be on the intake, that might be on there, but now I can see when you're nervous and we get into a topic and all of a sudden you pop. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, oh, you brought in Newport. What's going on? Tell me about that, right? It gives me a different paper. Or if now somebody you might see something in the background, or people do feel more comfortable when they're home. And there are things, like I said, you would not necessarily see. I now see people with their bonnets on, right? They're not coming into the office with, with their the Sunday best on anymore, right? They're feeling free enough to just be who they are. And not that they did not feel, because my whole tagline is authenticity. You got to be yourself in order to heal yourself, right? But virtual is absolutely here to stay. I know that there are some clients of mine who are like, no, this is too convenient, right? And I had a lot of clients who were, my office was in Laurel, Maryland, who were in Waldorf, who were in Temple Hills, and for people who might not know, that can be 45 minutes to an hour. And if you're talking about Waldorf, that can be an hour plus away. So the convenience of it. But yeah, sometimes you do miss, being able to, I don't see the toe tapping anymore, right? I can see the leg shaking, because if unconsciously your whole body can shake, right? But yeah, I do miss it though.
Well, to answer the question, when should they seek help? As you said, as soon as you feel like you need it, find someone, start somewhere. There's help available virtually and in person. Just a few more questions. One, is depression a disease? And if so, is there a cure?
Ooh, go ahead, Jasmine.
That's a loaded question, right? Because you have different types of depression. Like you said, you have people who know the days are getting shorter. That means cold weather is coming, and they are bracing themselves to have that seasonal depression. And then you have people who have chronic depression, which is not going anywhere. And so it is treatable, but it's and I don't want to discourage anyone, but it's an everyday task, right? And one of the things that I always talk to my clients about who have depression is you have to take care of yourself every day. You have to have self-care every day. And self-care is, if you're on medication, you're taking it every day. If you know that your depression worsens, when the wintertime comes, then how are we going to prepare for that? We're not going to brace for the blow, but we also need to prepare for it so that when it happens and you hit that low, you're so used to using your coping skills that it's second nature. And you're not grasping for air, so to speak, to try to, I need to get back to my baseline. You've been practicing it so that you can manage it and get through it, not get over it, not rush through it, not tell yourself you need to snap out of it, but you're actually managing it so that it doesn't manage you.
Absolutely. And I will, when we talk about depression as a disease, you're going to say dis-ease, right? And what's happening is you have a disruption in your mood. You also have a disruption in your mind, right? The chemicals that's going on in your mind, how the neurotransmitters was happening. One of the biggest things that depression hit is the amygdala, and that is your memory. That's the emotional part of the brain. Most times people who have depression is based upon an emotional injury, right? Not saying all the time, but typically that's what it's coming from. And now you have a misfiring in the amygdala. So now you have, unconsciously, you don't see my amygdala. Does anybody? If you see it, listen, we might need to talk afterwards, but you don't see it. And so a lot of times when people are just like, get over it, it's the reason why I can't get over this breakup. The reason why I can't get over this feeling is because it's not just happening on the outside of me, it's happening on the inside of me, and it's actually happening neurology. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It's happening in my mental, in my brain. So now when we're talking about depression, one of the things is, for me, I don't have any of my clients and anybody I have dealt with that depression wasn't a symptom of something more, right? Mm-hmm. I personally have not dealt with somebody who has not, and especially over COVID, I've never dealt with this much death in my entire career. Now we got trauma, we got complex trauma. So trauma is any distressing event that takes place in our lives, right? And that can be perceived or an actual situation. So meaning somebody can reject me. I could reach out to a guy and say, hey, I think you're cute, and he could reject me. If that is perceived in my mind as a trauma event, a distressing event that messes up how the chemicals in my brain are functioning, I am now a recipient or a person who has experienced trauma. And how I view life now is different. After, post that trauma experience, is different than prior to that trauma experience. So now you got complex trauma. So complex trauma means, I'm gonna talk about myself. My mother was on drugs. That's one traumatic event. My father was on drugs, and my father died when I was 15. Another traumatic event, right? My mother was also an alcoholic. Another traumatic event. And I grew up in a violent neighborhood. Another traumatic event, right? I witnessed people, my grandmother, who was like a mother because my mother was on drugs, died when I was 15, 2 months after my father passed away. Another traumatic event. So when you're talking about depression and now I'm shut down, I'm not focused as much as possible, I'm irritable. If people don't know what's happening in my immediate circle or what's going on, you don't know that depression is there. And that depression is there because of what I am experiencing. And how do I now, this is what happens. What has now caused my brain to function based upon what happened? But a lot of times people don't get to those parts because we're focusing on how we feel, which is the depression. So for me, how I approach depression is as a symptom, right? Is as a symptom to something much deeper. You are not your depression. Although you feel that way, although there is a lack of motivation, you might have increased sleep, decreased sleep, increased appetite, decreased appetite, loss of motivation. You may be able to go to work, but you're not doing any of your social things that you used to do. Or you might not go to work, but you're still doing your social things. So now for me, when you're thinking about depression as a disease or depression as just a diagnosis, and for me, or depression as a symptom, I think they're all in one. To me, it's your approach to the depression, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times people don't want to admit that they are depressed because that might come across as weak. They might not want to say that they have a disease, because now does that mean it is no cure? For me, depression in and of itself, I'm not going to say it has a cure, but it can be managed. And that's kind of what Jasmine was saying. With me, my trauma, depending on a good day, I may have a bad day because now those memories are coming back. And guess what? I feel depressed. In August 2021, I went through a very depressive state. Probably for the whole entire month of August. But was I still at work? Was I still helping people? Was I still this therapist? Absolutely. But what happened when I ended my sessions? I was in the bed. I lost a lot of weight. But there were some things, my abandonment issues came back up, right? And I had to now not focus so much on how I felt, but that was an indicator that there's something else happening. And now being able to say what took place and be honest and authentic with myself without having any self-condemning judgment on how I feel, on what I'm thinking, so that I can really process so I can get to the next level. Right. And that to me, so when I help my clients, a lot of times another thing I do with depression is I tell them to give depression a name, give it a name. And now I ask you, like, Denise, let's do this. When you think about depression, right? And when you have suffered with depression, even now or yesterday or 2 years ago, what are some of the characteristics or symptoms that you would tell me, characteristics of depression?
Not being productive, laying in the bed, knowing you got stuff to do, just no desire to get up.
Right. Okay. Was it negative, positive talk to you?
It was a combination. No, it was negative. Not gonna lie.
Okay. I'm about to say, tell me. No, I'm about to hit you. Tell me. So because I'm not judging, I want to explore.
Because there, I'll talk myself into believing, especially if you've done something in the past that was extraordinary, you can convince yourself that you can do this again. Like the mentality of, I can write a 30-page paper overnight, so I can just keep putting it off forward. And so you have those conversations with yourself, girl, you did this before, so you can lay here another hour, an hour turn to a day. And so those are the kind of positive ones, but they're self-defeating and they don't work towards the goal.
See, you see how even because we were going to get to that, even if you called it positive, I was just going to ask you to explain how is it positive, and then all you were going to do was recognize that even though I'm feeling like this is positive, it's actually positive reinforcing the negative behavior.
Yeah.
Right. That's the beauty of therapy. So now let's just say those characteristics are now, if that was a friend in your life, if your friend was constantly telling you, you don't got to do this, you just lay in the bed, you don't have to, man, don't eat nothing because your body don't even matter. Your body don't need no nutrients. If that was the type of friend in your space, would you keep that friend around?
Absolutely not.
You wouldn't. So now let's figure out how we can stop allowing depression to be our best friend, and to know that because you can say that now, that's not you. So now depression is a thing that's outside of you that you can actually handle, and you can actually put up a not today. Right now, guess what? Depression is not going to go anywhere. Every so often, it's going to knock on your door and it's going to say, right now, this is what always happens. We don't need to do that. We need to just go ahead and cut the phone off. Don't talk to nobody. Don't answer this person. Don't answer that person. Don't let nobody know. You don't need no help. You don't need help. But when that happens, what you will learn to do is be able to put that hand up and say, not today. And then if you give it a name, let's call the name TT, right? Let's call him Shanae. Let's call it Shanae. Now you be like, Shanae, not today, Shanae. Now that's Shanae. So now when you start seeing different things come up, you can now say, that's Shanae. That's Shanae right there. And now because you have a label on it, you might need to say, you know what, I need to go call my therapist, Brianna, because Shanae acting up right now. And I'm having a hard time putting a hand up on her. I'm actually fellowshipping with Shanae a little bit more. Let me go ahead and call Brianna so we can talk about it. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. There's a word you just used though with label. And oftentimes that label of depression, even though it's the stigma is slowly being peeled back, just having that label of being depressed. If you especially come from an overachieving family or even a religious family or such and such, that label still carries a lot that will keep you from seeking help. Brianna, talk about how we can continue to peel back the stigma to that label.
Yeah, I love that question, Denise. I think the ways that we can do it is having these conversations like we are now and blasting it on social media, you writing your book. The more people share their own stories. And that's why I loved working with Kayana, because of authentic conversations and just tools that she gives people by sharing her story. And also saying, yeah, I'm still working on it too. Like it's something that I have to manage. And so I think that that's something that I'm committed to doing, is being authentic with people about yeah, I have a therapist. This therapist has a therapist. And sometimes those things come up. I may have managed it well for 2 years, but boom, something happened. And now I need to kind of check in. And so I think just having more conversations like this, writing books like you're doing, and just being able to sit with ourselves and say, yeah, I'm struggling and it's okay, but I'll make it out, but I'm struggling right now. So just more authentic moments.
I think it's so powerful for you to say this therapist has a therapist.
Yeah.
Like, I need that on a shirt. I need y'all to receive that. Make sure the person that you are going to for help has somebody that they go to for help and is continuing to feed and grow themselves so that they can continue to be able to feed and grow you. I think that's super powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies, I appreciate you all. I've got one last question for you, and then you can share any closing points afterwards. But I'd like each of you to share at least one thing for that person who perhaps still is challenged with going and finding services, but they want to do something to begin the process at home with themselves. What's one tool or one strategy that you can give them to begin doing some work within themselves? Jasmine, we can start with you.
Okay. One strategy that I would say just to kickstart that off is I would encourage them to pick a time to take 5 minutes just to sit with themselves. And it could be listening to music without words, or it could be a guided meditation, but just 5 minutes just to be, so that you can get used to being still and being with your thoughts and not trying to control the present.
Wow, that's powerful. And I'm trying to sit still, just thinking about sitting still.
Well, because what happens in our stillness, right? Our answers to our questions, or healing doesn't come when we're asking questions or constantly talking. It comes from stillness, but it's so uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
That's why I always say, and you can even, if 5 minutes is too much, start with 2 or 3. It's not, you gradually get into it, but your stillness is when you work on your relationship with yourself. And essentially that's what you're doing when you're seeking therapy, is you are strengthening the relationship with yourself.
That's powerful. I'm going to take that tool for me, because in my stillness, I'm still too active. I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, I'm going through checklists, and just sit down somewhere, child. I'm going to take that tool for myself. Thank you so much. Brianna?
Yeah, something I would say, when I was struggling, when I was about 19 years old, before I reached out to my mom, and I didn't say anything, I would write. Not everyone's a writer, but I would write and journal my feelings and my thoughts. And I would do voice memos. I would talk to God. I would record how I was really feeling, because that was the place where I felt safest. And so then eventually I was like, okay, I have about 20 voice notes. This may be a thing. Let me go say something to my mom. So I would encourage you to express your feelings in a way that's healthy, that's on paper, that's on video, whatever. And you don't have to post it. That's where people get a little tricky, but just for you, just for you. And I love what Jasmine said, those moments of stillness, of not doing, is where it's like, oh man. So I that's what I would share.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much. Kayana?
I would say one of the biggest things that happens is we lose the ability to be real with ourselves because we don't like what we see, right? We have this idea of who we want ourselves to be, right? And when we don't act that way or present that way, even when we're by ourselves, we don't accept it, right? Because to accept it is to say that I'm bad. And then to say that I'm bad is to say that I'm not enough. And so one of the biggest things I'm going to say is make sure that you always know that you are enough, right? You are not what you do. And so in order to become your best self, you have to know where you're lacking to get to that point. And you not being the person you want to be today does not mean you will never get to that point, but we cannot change what we are not aware of, and we cannot change what we cannot accept about ourselves. And acceptance is so important. So that's what I'm gonna start off with. I want you, when you're sitting by yourself and you take that time and you are just being quiet, some things might come up. So after that 5 minutes and you realize that you have attitude, or you recognize that you don't put in, you may complain more than you do. That's okay. Guess what? Because now that you are aware of it, you don't want to self-condemn yourself with judgment, self-condemning judgment, because that's going to keep you stuck. That's going to keep you in a space where you don't want to be. You don't like it. That's what your emotions are letting you know. And you want to get to a place where you like everything about you, right? The goal is, in order to get to what I like, I have to recognize what I don't like. And then I have to recognize why don't I like this? But it starts with being real with myself. It starts with saying that the reason, Kayana, you're not cleaning up is because in this area, you keep putting it off. If you want your bedroom to look a certain way, you're gonna have to fold them clothes. Right. And right now you don't fold your clothes. We want you to fold them clothes. Right now, Kayana, if you are taking things personal, if you are constantly offended when people talk to you because, you don't like rejection, you don't like people telling you no, be able to accept yourself. Don't call yourself petty. Don't call yourself a child. I'm acting like a child. I'm being petty. That's self-condemning judgment. It doesn't allow you to just be free to accept who you are in order to take yourself to the place where you want to be, right? So that's what, if I could put all of that together, is being able to really sit in your authenticity with acceptance, understanding, patience, and love, and most importantly, also compassion with yourself. So now that I know, here's what I'm struggling with, authentically, I don't like it. It's not who I want to tell everybody that this is what I struggle with. I got an anger problem. I got an attitude problem. I'm afraid to talk to people because I'm scared of rejection. I'm afraid to be around people. I'm afraid to speak up in public, even though I know I had something to say. I just don't want people to reject me. To be able to sit in that authentically, you now can see what you need in order to change it, to become that person who, when you are like Jasmine, when you are in front of people, you can talk because you're no longer afraid to be in front of the camera anymore. And now you're helping people because, baby, you got all that stuff. Everything you have is already in you that you need. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, indeed. All three of those. Sit with yourself in some quiet time and be still and get just with yourself in a space where you can be connected to yourself and reconnected in some situations. Write your thoughts, voice them into your phone if you need to, and so that you kind of have a record, and even you're able to see some trends in what your thinking is and your mindset is, and just journal. And then, of course, be authentic and real with yourself so that you can begin that healing process, continue that healing process, and ultimately achieve your goals. Man, you all I could talk to forever. But I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your contribution. And I would love it if each of you would share how anyone can connect with you, should they want to just say thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge and your encouragement, or also to utilize your services. Brianna?
Yes. Oh, so you can reach me and follow me on Instagram at Brianna, BRIANNA.M.DANCE. That's my Instagram handle. I'm also accepting new clients under Authentic Connections Therapeutic Services, the wonderful Miss Kayana Bradley's private practice. And I look forward to just meeting and connecting and helping people on their journey.
All right, Miss Jasmine.
You can also connect with me on Instagram, Pride of Nyla, PRIDEOFNYLA. And my website is connected there. You can reach me on Instagram.
And Miss Kaya.
And I'm on Instagram. I had to pull up my Instagram to make sure I know it. It is Authentic Connections TS. So the T is therapeutic, and then the S is service. So it's Authentic Connections TS. That's also the website, AuthenticConnectionsTS.com. And that way you can also see, if you wanted to connect with Brianna, you can connect with myself. and connect with. I don't have anything else for you.
That's all right. Any last thoughts or words of encouragement? You all have the floor.
Words of encouragement for me, regardless of what you're feeling or whether or not you're thinking about reaching out to a therapist or what you're going through, just be very aware of how you're connecting with yourself. You know, go outside, get vitamin D, drink your water, eat your fruits and vegetables. Just make sure that you are showing up for your body so that it can show up for you.
Anyone else?
Absolutely. I would say making sure that I know that I'm saying this word all the time, but it's really a way of life for me. As therapists on this call right here, we all have our therapists. Sometimes you may not feel like you need to reach out to someone, but even if if you have the thought, let that person tell you. If you have a thought, maybe I need a therapist, go on that thought. Maybe I need a life coach, go on that thought. Maybe I need to talk to someone else. Maybe I need to talk to sometimes people get a referral from their primary care physician, and talk to someone who can steer you in the right direction. Because sometimes I came to therapy even as a therapist because I was going through a situation. I was actually going through a breakup that pinpointed so many things in my life that I thought I was good with. And I didn't necessarily think I needed a therapist, but because I was in school to be a therapist, and now I'm like, wait, if I'm feeling like this and it's hard for me to focus even in school, this is kind of some of the things that might help me to get to where I need to be. And I've had my therapist ever since. And sometimes therapy doesn't have to be once a week. It can be when you want to see that therapist, right? Whatever you have in your head, go ahead and get it out, and you make the way. You tell the therapist, you are your expert. You are the expert of yourself. Not me, not the psychiatrist, not even the primary care physician. You are. So you let us know what you need once you realize, wait, I might just need to go get this checked out just to see.
And I would add that treatment looks different for everyone, and self-care. Oh, I think Jasmine mentioned it. Self-care for me, my routine to manage depression may be exercising, and also watching my diet, also seeing a therapist, also reading my Bible, also going to do something new. Also, it could be, it's this and that. It doesn't have to be just one thing. And so I think really, again, going back to what everyone has been saying, is sitting with yourself and realizing what are the things that you enjoy out of life and what are the things that you don't enjoy, and where you are and where that baseline is. Just really finding what that package looks for you.
Thank you all so much for sharing again. I appreciate you greatly. Keep
Well,
doing what you're doing.
Thank you for having us. Yes, we appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. Oh.